is an opportunity to look at a model, something comparable. Now, obviously, not exact. Dr. Harris can explore some of the subtleties, but it does give me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Kenneth Harris, who's also a board member of the coalition. Dr. Harris is a professor emeritus at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of Western Ontario, having spent 25 years in active teaching practice of vascular surgery. He is the retired executive director of the Office of Education and deputy CEO of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, having retired recently in 2022. So Dr. Harris, I think, has some obviously intimate knowledge of the operation of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons that he's happy to share with us today. So I'll turn it over to you, sir, and thank you very much for your participation.
It's absolutely my pleasure and a great honor to speak with all of you on a matter that I am very invested in the CCPR and very much hope the important work that you are all contributing to carries forward. I do need to do a couple of disclosures. Firstly, I am not speaking on behalf of the Royal College, but I'm speaking as a knowledgeable individual, having worked there for close to a decade and a half. I'm also not trying to sell you on this particular model. I would rather aim to spark curiosity, open windows for opportunity for discussion, possible modification, and application. I will try and be brief, but I'm going to have to ask you to hold me to account on that one. So the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada was formed in 1929 with the specific mandate to oversee postgraduate medical education. It is a charitable, not-for-profit, volunteer-based organization composed of about 50,000 members, and speaks to and for all specialties in Canada, with the exception of family medicine, who have their own college. There are about 250. There are about 200 members, staff at the Royal College. It is a physical building, but that is to actually house the staff. Of those 200, less than 10 are actual physicians, and the post I held was as Director of Specialty Education, which oversaw the workings arm of the Royal College that handled training following medical school. I'm afraid I need to give you a very brief tour of medical education in Canada, just so you understand where things fit in. There are, depending upon Mr. Ford's mood in this month, in the neighborhood of 18 medical schools in Canada. And it is only within those medical schools associated with the university that undergraduate medical education can take place. That's both basic science and fundamental clinical training. At the end of 4 years of training, the graduate received an MD degree. That's a university degree. It does not allow the individual to practice medicine at that point, but it is required to practice medicine as other qualifications are met. Following medical school, an individual would enter either a 2-year training program from the College of Family Physicians of Canada, or a 4 to 7 year training program in one of the 68 specialties recognized by the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons. The Royal College prescribes the standards for training. It examines the candidates, and it provides certification that they have met those standards at the end of their training after a high stakes examination. Even that does not allow you to practice medicine in Canada. Medicine is controlled, policed, and its jurisdiction is provincial. And each province has a college of physicians and surgeons of X province. In my case, coming from Ontario, it's the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. They are responsible to the Minister of Health and to the provincial government, and they actually do have investigative powers and sanctioning powers. And if you try and practice medicine without it, it's a really, really bad thing to do. Some junior doctors have tried it, and really, it is very bad. All postgraduate training takes place under the jurisdiction of one of the 18 medical schools through a postgraduate office within the Faculty of Medicine. I'd like to now transition to actually talking about how the Royal College functions and some of the benefits it has. I would invite you to interrupt me if I'm not being clear. If you have questions, again, I hope to be brief enough that there is lots of times for questions. The Royal College's role is actually to set standards, and as you can imagine, with 68 specialties ranging from psychiatry to internal medicine to pediatrics to vascular surgery, it's very difficult to come up with a single standard. However, the college has developed high-level competencies which are required by all physicians, which then are taken by individual specialty committees. And I'll do a small case study for you in a few moments. Each specialty committee will take the high competencies and develop their own standards. So those standards, the high-level competencies approved by the Council of the Royal College, are medical expertise, the ability to communicate with patients, abilities to collaborate with one another as well as with other organizations and paramedical professions, the issue of professionalism, scholarship, which I'll just amplify by saying about half of what I learned in medical school is either no longer true or no longer applicable at this point in time. So the scholarship aspect is maintaining your quality of care and knowledge, a leadership role and an advocate role. And within those high-level competencies, each individual specialty can actually plot out what the competencies of the specialty are. For example, in my case, because I can speak freely about myself without asking for disclosure, it will tell me what operations I should be doing, and in what circumstances I should be doing, and give indications to what outcomes I should be expected. Now, within that, within the Royal College, each specialty has a specialty committee. And this is, I think, where the crux, the importance of some of the message I hope I can get across today is, with the volunteer organization, these specialty committees are composed of a chair, regional representation of specialists knowledgeable within the profession. It also has room for lay members of the public, the regulatory bodies from each individual province, as well as other necessary partners. For example, in forensic pathology, we would have someone with a legal background sitting on that specialty specialty committee, and they will set the standards for all of the high-level competencies which are expected of the individual. So it's not the Royal College staff per se that are coming up with these standards. It is, in fact, members who are affected by these standards and are knowledgeable in the practice. But having national guidelines, which are acceptable and well thought out, has actually led to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of the provinces all buying into the Royal College's guidelines. Therefore, certification by the Royal College becomes one of their requirements for licensure, although they actually have the ability to hire and give a license to whomever they want. I think the reason this has become acceptable is because it is indeed truly collaborative. The local regulatory authorities, the university representatives sit on the committees and provide input. So whenever we come up with some highfalutin theoretic idea, they can actually bring to our attention what we may be asking is inspiring, but clearly not practical, and clearly isn't going to work within their province. So we try and be inclusive of public, of stakeholders, et cetera, as processes are built. So how does it work? Well, it works fairly well, but it's been an evolution. Things have evolved since 1929. It would be nice to say that it's a very smooth running process, and I have to say for the most part it is, but it is not uncommon to have some friction, and we work on a process of consensus. Mario has his hand raised. Mario, do you have a question, or do you want to re-guide me?
No, it's actually just a general question. I'd imagine that the depth and width of topics and issues and amount of knowledge must be pretty extensive. And I'm wondering, does the college have some form of ongoing communications, ongoing learning opportunities for the surgeons and physicians type of thing? Is it something that's part of their continuous program, or is it, well, you went through the process and hope you're doing well type of thing? Is there an ongoing development, improvement, learning process?
Yes, indeed there is. And again, speaking to the collaboration with the medical regulatory authorities, they have accepted the process that has been put in place by the Royal College. So they have just changed their guidelines. So if you don't mind, I'm going to speak to the past guidelines, which required me to demonstrate 400 hours of investment in professional improvement and professional learning over a 5-year cycle. And those could be attending major conferences, although that's not a great way to learn. Sometimes it can involve personal learning projects. So when I identify a patient problem that I need to bone up on, I will go to the literature and investigate that. It also involves quality improvement. So assessment of my practice. What have I learned from that assessment of my practice, and what steps am I going to take to move forward? So there very definitely is impetus to continue my professional development. In fact, I even need to do it in retirement. So
I never doubted it, sir. I just wanted to get a flavor for what processes exist and what approach is taken. Thank you very much, sir.
Most welcome. The rigor of residency training, which is carried out under the auspices of the universities, often in university centers, is much stricter than the training I get. And it is that escalation of part of my residency training was learning how to teach myself, identify problems, and move on. So it's graduated decreasing supervision and increasing self-learning.
Sounds very professional to me, sir.
Thank you. Jennifer, you had a question?
Yes, thanks. So as I'm sure you know, the police have a lot of input from community about what community thinks should happen in policing, both through many means, inquests, but also just sort of community activism. I imagine there's maybe a little bit of that in medicine, not nearly as much. I wonder if the community interests get responded to in some way by the college.
So the answer is yes, and thank you very much for the question, because I think it actually leads us into something a little bit different. The Royal College doesn't make a lot of educational materials. There are some. There are But we realize that within the standards and with what we're asking for, there has to be a local flavor. So what you may learn from the University of Toronto in one of the downtown hospitals may be very different than what you'll learn from the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, which regards the entire northern aspect of Ontario as their classroom. In the past, we've prescribed a set amount, a set number of months on individual rotations. And just to give you an example, in internal medicine, there may be a 3-month rotation on endocrinology, 3 months on cardiology. That doesn't work in all places. In fact, what we need to do is go back to the community and say, how can you teach this postgraduate trainee about endocrinology and cardiology without all the specialties available to you? And they do it in a longitudinal fashion. Similarly, the communities that various universities and various sites serve is very different. And I was going to get to this in the good, the bad, and the ugly. The somewhat fractious interaction between the urban-based, university-based surgeons and those who are practicing in smaller communities, each one saying that the other doesn't know what real life is really like. And in fact, we need to prepare these individuals to be able to practice any place in Ontario. And that's not to say that when you start practice, you are at the top of your game. You require the help of your colleagues to integrate into that, but you need to have the basic foundation. So when we develop educational materials within the Royal College, and it is actually Royal College volunteers that are developing that material, we give it to the universities and say, please feel free to modify this so this meets your local needs. This meets your area of practice and your province's requirement. Does that address what you asked me? I hope.
That was extremely interesting. When you're gearing education to particular communities, is there any feedback sort of from patients in that community about how they feel that those needs are being addressed?
So that I'd have to describe as a work in progress. Certainly within the teaching framework, where a postgraduate trainee cannot practice medicine without supervision, there is the aspect where the supervisor will witness some of the acts of the resident and will provide feedback to it. And we have a tool within the Royal College for 360 feedback that would include patient input, etc. But we do try and encourage the trainees to provide feedback, as well as getting feedback from the nurses, other professional people. So I don't want to present too utopian a picture here, because when theory meets practice, there tends to be a nasty collision. But it is a work in progress, and something, as the college has moved to competency-based medical education, that we're working on.
Really interesting. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Are there other questions? I said I'd say something briefly on the good, the bad, and the ugly. Obviously, having worked for the college for many years and contributed to it both as a volunteer and as a staff member, I've got lots of good to say about it. There are times, however, when it can become somewhat imperious, and it doesn't hurt to be reminded that we need to pay attention to the regulators, and we need to pay attention to what we really want, which is increasing the professionalization of the medical community. I choose to view what the Royal College does with the quality improvement, et cetera, with the training standards, et cetera, as polishing good apples. I think the job of finding the rotten apples belongs to that of the regulators, because they have investigative powers and they have that responsibility. And I think that opens up a huge opportunity for the Royal College. And something you may wish to think about as you look at a center of excellence for police professionalism is that we can reach for a high bar, whereas those who are defending the public need to set the bottom standard. And when the standard's set, that sometimes is where you aim for. So I'd far rather see a high standard. Just a couple of other comments. It's complex and it's different. Medicine is different from the police, although we both, if you look at things from a very dark side, both have authority to assault a patient or an individual as we do our job. One of the big differences between my work and yours is I can take a knife to a patient, but I seldomly am faced with a patient who is bringing a knife back to me. So I don't envy you that aspect of things. I think we sometimes we can see with national standards tokenism. So as an example, it was thought that every postgraduate medical trainee needed to become an expert in ethics. And what we saw happen was every university put in place a half-hour lecture on medical ethics and say, there, we've done it. We need to look at the way things are taught, and certainly in postgraduate education, and I hope in policing, a lot of the aspects are learning in the field and getting feedback on what happens in the field and learning from that. So I guess just to wrap up, 3 bullet points is what my daughter told me I was allowed. So I would suggest that I think there is efficiency in setting national standards and doing and having those standards educational. I think there's a cooperative and inclusive approach that is very efficient in producing products and learnings that can be applied across the country, as long as there is an understanding that they need to be shared and modified at the local level, as Jennifer has pointed out. And I think it's very important that we stay in our swim lanes. And so, lesson learned for the Royal College was that the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada stays in its educational standard setting swim lane and stays out of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of regulatory authority in the provinces. We collaborate closely, but we don't tread on each other's toes, and we have mutual respect for each other. So those would be my 3 bullet points, and I thank you for your patience in my rambles over the last 20 minutes. Mike, back to you. Happy to answer any questions and welcome your discussion about modifying anything I've said.
I have a question.
Oh, okay, just a second. Who's that? Who's asked? All I have is a phone number.
That's
somebody-
Kim Airy, Mike.
Oh, okay, Kim. Yep, go ahead, please.
Just a question on a standard, and I don't know about the college, but is there a check of in our case, police officer cannot have a criminal record? And I'm just wondering if the medical profession doesn't allow people to go down this educational standard. Do they have a record check done before they embark, or is there some sort of a statement that tells people if you take this, if you go down that road of education, there's no guarantee you're going to be a doctor at the end of the day? Is there something like that? I mean,
the answer is yes. Medical schools have a variation, so I can't speak knowledgeably to that. When I became an MD, and forgive me, this is ancient history, but when I got my MD and applied for hospital privileges as a resident, there was a police check at that point in time. Not only are there police checks on the medical profession, but there are also regulatory checks. So any patient who wishes to complain about me about anything they wish can file that complaint with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of the province I'm licensed in. And if I have been found to be in error, that may be on my permanent record. I alluded to earlier, postgraduate trainees attempting to practice medicine without going through the licensure procedure. The ones who have done that actually have a permanent mark upon their record for that. Did that address your question?
It sort of does. The reason I sort of say it is the colleges and universities, through the training and education of students, are very much interested in filling the seats. And individuals that may not be qualified to be a police officer, but think they're going to get all the training about it, go down that road thinking that they'll get into policing, or in your case, into medical world. And I just wondered if there was some sort of preventing people from going down that education path. Possibly you've answered that with the regulatory bodies in the provinces. I don't think the colleges and universities care, quite honestly.
Creating a physician is a very costly enterprise. So there certainly is incentive to, once someone's selected, to get them through and practicing medicine. However, both in undergraduate and postgraduate medicine, there has been an effort made to identify competencies of that individual. And if they are falling behind in achieving their competencies, to try and bring this to their attention. So no Canadian nice guy, oh, you'll do fine, we'll let the next guy fail you. It is observing the competencies in a clinical situation and identifying what is working and what is not working. And as I said, rather than approaching this as a punitive thing, you don't have the competencies, you should be dismissed from medical school, it's more, how can I help you achieve the competencies and move you forward? Although at the end of the day, if you continue to fail to progress in those competencies, you do need to be dismissed. And again, this sounds rather utopian. I spent a lot of time trying to move towards a competency framework during my time at the Royal College, and we were trying to put the responsibility on the profession to say, if this individual is not suited to be physician, surgeon, whatever, this be identified to the individuals, and they be asked to look at a different training path.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. And I think Mr. Bellegarde had a question.
Hi, I have, thank you. Excellent presentation.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bellegarde, I'm having a great deal of difficulty hearing it.
Okay, how's that? A little better?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to do a bit of a comparison to the training that we go through here in the provinces. And so you got prerequisites for police entry, like education level, security clearances, psychological testing, physical attributes, behavioral testing, a number of other things. Then you go into the training programs themselves. Got general training that all must take. Then after you go into the general training, then they're sort of sent out to the police services, and from there you go through your patrol work, and then you try, maybe you go into some specialty training. I'm wondering if once you get past, like the armed forces, for instance, once you get past the basic training, then you have the opportunity to go into a specific trade. And I don't see that happening with police services, where they want, if they have the attributes and the attitude and the competencies to go into specific things like cybercrime, corporate financial crimes, international drug and gangs, firearms, and all the other specialty trainings that police officers have to do. I don't think we have that, at least not in Saskatchewan. It's sort of, once you do your 5 years in patrol, you can select something that you're interested in, or Is there a way that they can go through that sort of look at current skills and knowledge and then go into specialty training programs right off the hop? Because the nature of crime is changing, I guess, and the kind of competencies and organizations required to combat that has not quite kept up to snuff, at least not in the prairies anyway. Ongoing professional development and cross training in other specialties as well is not done well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an interesting, it's a fascinating question. And I'm not sure I've got an answer for you. In medicine, there was a recognition many years ago that, in fact, doing just medical school and 1 year's internship does not really prepare you for practice. And so family medicine became a specialty. And family medicine is a huge specialty because you've got to be a bit of an expert in every single specialty that I was allowed to follow in great depth. So in fact, they abolished the rotating internship in favor of a family medicine residency. So appreciating I'm wandering around a little bit. I think the question you asked regarding police is something that you as individuals knowledgeable in policing need to debate and answer for yourselves. What model would work best for you to give you the product that is needed by your constituency and the public?
Thanks, Dr. Harris, and thanks, Mr. Bellegarde, for, of course, raising issues that I think the working group are going to have to consider.